This week, the EACC released a report called the National Ethics and Corruption Survey 2018 report. And the report had some findings, and I'll read a few of them for you guys and get your reaction to how corruption has affected you personally in 2019. Corruption for the second year running, according to that report, topped the list. So most Kenyans feel that corruption is their #1 problem, 49.4%. The second problem is unemployment, 36.8%. Their third problem is poverty or famine, 27.2%. In terms of corruption, how does it manifest in their lives? A lot of them said bribery. 87.4% say that is their biggest problem under the corruption banner. Yep. Others say unethical conduct observed in public offices while seeking services, whether it's passports, birth certificates, etc., 28.1%. Others say intimidating or abusive behavior by public servants and conflict of interest at 4.1%. Before we even go on to others, let me get some reactions here. Mariga, let me start with you. Corruption, #1 problem in this country in 2019, beating unemployment and poverty or famine, which leads to death, by the way. That's at number 3.
But I don't think they're completely separated. I think corruption leads to every single one of these things.
Yes.
Corruption is a reason we don't have food security. It's a reason people are poor. It's a reason we don't have healthcare. It's a reason we have bad education. It goes across the board. And now when we're having a discussion over, I don't believe that a giver of a bribe is equal to a taker of a bribe because of the understanding
you need to justify that.
Power elements, right?
Okay.
Because I've done an article on this and the numbers prove it. Over half of these, close to 60%, are giving bribes for essential services, right? So when you're telling me that I'm going to the Ministry of Lands and I have an acre of land and I bought it and I just need to secure a bit of land for my own children, and the only way to get it or to avoid losing it is by paying a bribe, you can't put the responsibility on me. I don't have the power. Now, truthfully is that I did go to the ballot box, but power is not equal. If we understand that, then we start holding the people in power responsible. 73% of people reported that they didn't report it because of the fear of reprisal, and it's real. We've all, and I'm saying this publicly, I've been extorted for bribes multiple times. I've been extorted for bribes as a young man in town, in the middle of the night by police, and I paid. Now, why did I pay? Because I'm in the middle of the night at 11 p.m. with two armed police looking at me. Do you think you'd believe me if people, they said I was a robber, I would die? And I know it. People are very aware of how people can use power and structures to work against them. In healthcare.
So who do you heap the most blame on if the bribe giver and the bribe taker are not equal?
The leader, the person taking the bribe, because they have the power. You give
them what, 60%, 70% of blame?
80% of the blame, because they know, they only ask for it because they know they can demand it, and not only can they demand it, they can enforce it. They can make your life harder and worse. Some of the basic institutions here, Ministry of Interior and Coordination, right, controls a lot of the things from identification cards, which have become very political, and people like Kenyan Somalis are marginalized continuously. So even at a basic institution like that, right, when people are paying bribes, and you found many Kenyan Somalis are forced to pay bribes to get IDs. They are Kenyans by birth, but what happens is that when I get an ID in 2 weeks from the time I apply. Kenyan Somalis take 6 months to a year. Wow. Without an ID, you can't open a bank account. Without ID, there are basic things you can't do. And so this person issuing an ID knows the power that he has, and he knows what will happen to you. And so when people say, we are the problem, no, if I can't access a service, I am not the problem. I was not elected to deliver services. I am not a public official. The responsibility cannot lie on me as a person trying to get services.
But even if you only share 20% of the blame, what can you do? Because they say that we've done enough to try and reform those who are in power, and that is proving difficult. And so many are saying it's time now for citizens to say no. And in 2003, we did see attempts by passengers in matatus to, citizens arrest. Yes. We did see people saying no to bribes and that sort of thing.
But the cost. People don't ask about the cost of fighting it, right? Let's assume that for all intents and purposes, I say no to this lands officer, right? I lose my land. I say no to the ID guy, I get no land. There's a very heavy cost. Everyone seems to want...
There's a heavy cost to not being corrupt.
Yes. In fact, the system incentivizes corruption. It rewards it. If you're not, you will suffer.
You said 2003 that they were trying to resist. But you see, 2003, you also have to remember that we were ranked as one of the most optimistic countries in the world. Yeah, there's a reason for that. There was a leadership element into the whole thing. Yeah, so it's the same thing my brother is talking about here, Mariga. You see, it's about who is on top, who is in charge, who is giving, you know, who is giving, what do you call, the moral, you know, that moral authority to say no to corruption.
This year it is possible that the president has spoken more about corruption than many other topics. That has not incentivized.
Now listen, talking about it is one thing, acting on it is a different thing altogether. And we have seen also the president saying, "Mutaka nifanya nini?" If it's a matter of talking about it, you know. Now look here, we are talking about corruption. If you allow me through this, on government department and agencies, one is most likely to encounter corrupt and unethical practices with the Kenya police. Now my question is this: how many times have we produced reports on corruption? Yeah, what have we done about it? Do we act on these reports every time we produce reports? That this and this entity is corrupt, this government agency is corrupt, this agency is corrupt, that is corrupt. Okay, the Auditor General report every year comes out, says County A is corrupt, this is the amount of money lost, yet no one gets, you know, punished for that. No one is jailed for that. Then we go to the next year, we give money to the ethics and anti-corruption itself. It's a taxpayer, you know, it's funded by the taxpayer. Then they give us reports every now. Who acts on those reports? What is the point of having a report if you cannot act on them? You know, every year, honestly.
You sound like a very frustrated man.
Yeah, I have to, and I am one, because, and I'm sure there are many out there I represent. I just happen to be the voice this morning that happens to be on this seat talking about these things. There are millions out there who will talk worse than I am doing. Yeah. But the point is, why do we have reports? Every year we produce reports. The ethics and anti-corruption gives us reports. The other day they were talking about counties, and they were saying certain counties, and they even mentioned a county in northern Kenya, Wajir, to be the top.
It's in this the same survey.
It's the same survey, yes. Right? Yeah, they said Wajir is the top county, I mean the most corrupt county in the country. They tell us the police are the most corrupt institution. And they have been telling us this report every year in, year out. But what are we doing about it?
What are we doing about
it?
Maliba, you've been scribbling notes there frantically. Are you equally as frustrated as Ahmed Kadar?
You know, I was writing was because I was just catching up on their conversation and just seeing probably what they miss and what they get right and how we further this conversation going ahead. Yes. I know we want to put a lot of weight or other responsibility, and I'll still go back to him that we talk about the leader, because corruption is about opportunity. Does an opportunity present itself to be corrupt? Both the receiver and the giver. And then there is the vulnerability. Even the person receiving sometimes is vulnerable because you have got a problem at home and somebody overwhelms you with an opportunity to solve it shortly. That's vulnerability, if you were to look at it differently. So you're also overwhelmed on your own side. Then who are you not to say, to receive it with thanksgiving? It becomes very, very much easier. But then probably we need to look at what corruption really does before I get to him making noise about the reports and why are we doing them, the reports and everything else. Even the students who do not pass their exams get their report cards anyway. It's a reflection mechanism just to show us where we are completely. And even if we do not do them, somebody else will do it. Long time ago, we didn't used to do them. So the international world and the other people will do it and still tell us in the world that we are doing badly. So it's also good that we continuously do this thing. There's no regime in the world that is not is completely corruption-free. Ours is that it's at a level where we have not been able.
It's interesting you say that on a morning when US President Donald Trump is currently facing an impeachment inquiry. And in Israel, we've also seen what's happening there with Benjamin Netanyahu.
So, but then those regimes and they have systems that work. Yep. You need to realize that's number one.
Let me finish.
Imagine,
I hope it's one line.
Yes, imagine the president assume being, you know, an impeachment inquiry going, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs testifying against him. The ambassadors testifying against him. Can we have, you know,
yes, it's going to happen.
Yes. Can we have
if it doesn't happen today, it will happen under our watch. If it doesn't happen under our watch, someday it will happen. That's the truth. But we need to look at this in the eye and say this, that corruption raises costs of basic doing business. It raises costs. Something that should actually have gone for 150 shillings ends up costing 3,000 shillings. Yeah. And by that, it limits access to some very, very important things. sometimes it limits access. You were due for an operation, somebody else, and your case is actually very serious, somebody else who has got the luxury of a little bit of extra money or can't wait, goes ahead of you. It could cost you. Today we have got a lot of cancer cases when we were told 10 years ago by a director kept telling us that from what we have heard, in 10 years we will have a lot of these cases coming up because this particular thing happened. And so that then raises the cost of healthcare in the country. Families are struggling, taking their people to India because somebody just needed cheap money. So it's limited access. We are putting a lot of money into health issues and we still need food. I heard her saying that food is not a very important thing. We should not be talking at it at this particular time. Yet food made us human. It is food. It's a very, very serious thing because if you're going to fight any particular war, any army, deny them food, they collapse. You're in a war. Yeah. So it's easy. That's how we actually, the political class and the army has always defeated us by denying us food. Somehow they control what we eat and how we eat, and including how we think, because even food will determine how you think. We have got a bigger brain because of the kind of food we have. It's energy, it's power. It's important to talk about these things. So going forward, it's important to actually say that corruption cannot be fought by one segment alone. Normally we say it is fought by the coalition of the concerned, or a coalition of the concerned. It has to be from both sides. Those who speak loudly about it, including a president who keeps on saying it repeatedly, like you have said, he could be a guy who is also overwhelmed. If we, the people, can actually also hold it from this particular end, the people, justice on this other end, so that we hold our leaders to stop speaking from both ends of the mouth. A president who is empowering DCI and DPP to fight corruption in these particular cases, and then he's frustrating the judiciary. He's not a serious man about fighting this. He needs to be put to account because after DPP has arrested and DCI, where do they take them? They take them to the judiciary, and then he's seated there frustrating the judiciary, saying that if they feel like listening to those cases, the president needs to start realizing that he's a steward and he doesn't own this country. That is a discussion for another day. He is a steward. He's a servant of the people. So he should not be sounding like, for example, we are a small kiosk of his business empire. He should stop thinking that just because he has compromised parliament to become an appendage of the executive, that now everything else should be at his beck and call. Those are very strong statements. They're very strong statements because the president...
Parliamentarians, some of them say that is not true.
It's true. They're just waking up the other day when they realized that after playing us for the last 7 years, everything is going south. So they have to show up and do some crocodile tears, and then they join us. They look like they are concerned. They are not representing us. They are managing us, including when they cry.
Including when they cry.
It's not representation.
I want to get Vivian to give a comment, and I know we're also due for a break. Do you have a quick comment you want to say on this before we take that break?
I really like what he's saying, but I'll just try and shift it a little bit because I was recently in the US for about 3 months, and of course, like he was saying, the biggest difference we have is that there is a system that works there. And so even driving around, you'd see so many placards as people wanting people to come and work for them.
And you were surprised to see that,
and I was
because
surprised.
You rarely see that here.
I mean, rarely even see it. Like it's I don't know, it's just hilarious. But, you know, and they'd have like these truck jobs and school bus driving, and they'd, jobs that would pay even up to $25 an hour. I mean, that's really good money if you compare to what the majority of Kenyans even have a glimpse of here. So when I came back, I decided to do just a very intimate event, and I call it Dominate. And the reason I wanted to do this is because I wanted to get a glimpse of Vitu kwa ground, Vile Ziko. I talk to people, of course, because of my influence, and I have a lot of people who DM me and all those things. But then when we had the Dominate, it had different aspects, and it was just a motivational, life-changing, you know, forum. And so it had a section that talked about finances, it had relationships, what else did it have? It had some music, all those things. But the part that caught me particularly was when the finances bit got in. And so we started asking people for feedback, and we had a financial expert, and she came and she was talking about how people need to be less spenders, especially now the culture that we have for young people, the online culture, which basically just tells everyone you need to buy everything and have everything. And so most people don't save, they don't buy things that will actually mean something to them in 5 or 10 years to come. And so, you know, after that talk, a lot of the feedback was we needed to hear more about finances, we need to understand how we can make money. And so it's the same issue. There's such a big issue when it comes to young people and money. They don't have the money, they don't know where to get it.
In fact, you're talking about saving as well, and do they have the money to save?
Yeah, they don't even know what to do to get themselves out of that situation. And so it's really sad, and I feel like to an extent we need to shift to the areas where people are trying to impart change. Like now for what I was trying to do with Dominate, right? Such that we stop focusing so much on, you know, our parliamentarians, because they say when you talk about a problem too much, you know what you also do? You magnify it, because it's a topic of discussion. If the problem was this small, you talk about it, it builds. And I feel like as a country, those are some of the things we do. We talk about our problems, we talk about them, they become big, they become humongous, they overtake us, they discourage us, they lead us to disappointment, depression rises. It's just a really horrible space to be in a country. So we need also to focus our energies on spaces where people are actually having valid discussions and know how to plug in and do the change. Because clearly, you know, our governance has a big issue. There is a lot of reluctance. I usually feel, just my instinct as a woman, that it's just few people sitting in these offices that are making our lives miserable. It's just in the same way where someone can have your money somewhere, right? And they're just refusing to put in the signature. And they just need to sign for you to get your money to feed your family.
But the longer they hold on to that, the more frustrated
the more you become frustrated. The people who are working for you become frustrated. So it's you know, it's a downward spiral. So we need to just, the pressure needs now to come from the good side. Because I feel also the good has the power to always override the evil. It just depends on how much energy and how we do it. The only reason the evil usually, you know, looks like it's flourishing is because evil people are very tactful, you know, wanajipanga. Organized. And now the other people on the other side, because you're good, you think
you're using the word evil interchangeably with corrupt.
Yes.
Okay.
You think things will fall on your lap.
Yes.
You know, it's like me saying because maybe I do some kind of music, then I'm not going to put any more effort. You know, God loves me. You see, when you're presenting yourself to the world, you have to be able to look just a little bit like the world, and then you use what you look like. Now you feed yourself the right information so that whatever comes out of you is actually edifying. Okay, so it's impactful. Those are interesting points that you've raised. Hang on, we had you for that break. I'll give you each a chance to speak when we come back, and we have some feedback. Let's put that up on the screen. This is what Kenyans are saying this morning. Rachel from KSM says, it's true in Kenya, the responsibility for bribing is on the receiver because of pressure and intimidation. All right, and we have another comment from Eldred. Thanks for tuning in. You say the EACC figure should worry all of us a lot. How can we be such a desperate country? How can public servants hate this country that much to the point of selling it to the lowest bidder? The next generation risks inheriting a hopeless country due to the actions of omission or commission by those running the society. This country is hurting. Okay. I think we have a tweet here, an SMS rather. Damaris Kamau, youth development expert. You say, thank you for the debate this morning. My take: 1, fight against corruption should be infused in the school curriculum. 2, anti-corruption messages and slogans should be visible. 3, where are the ombudsman and whistleblowers? 4, things are bad. Okay. 5, use retired public officers of 1980s and 1990s to assert it. It is indeed possible to be ethical. Okay, thank you, Damaris, for that. We have one tweet, and we're putting that up on this. Remember, you can also weigh in on this. How has corruption affected you in 2019? As we reflect on that EACC survey, 22422 is the SMS line. The hashtag is Daybreak. DY956, you say, without strong watchdog institutions, impunity becomes the very foundation upon which systems of corruption are built. And if impunity is not demolished, all efforts to bring an end to corruption are in vain. As we take that break, Vivian had an interesting point, which I think is good to reflect on. As we highlight all the incidents of corruption that affect this country, is it also important to highlight those who are doing good? Could that affect the situation? And also, are we a depressed country? Because she felt that, in many ways, many are headed in that particular direction. What are your thoughts? Let us know. Quick break. My panelists really eager to weigh in, and we'll give them a chance to do so when we come back.